right, so that's on, and then hopefully this is. There's so much spam coming through right now. Do you guys get this spam too?
Yeah.
Like it looks like garbage.
We got some emails earlier. I was kind of scared to click on because
Yeah, it's garbage.
It was like some,
I'm sure.
It was talking about somebody our account.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, they always try to scare you with that stuff too.
Account closing notification. Click to validate email. Sincerely, IT help us. But it just sounds like weird.
Yep, I would just ignore them all. You should be good to go.
All right. So how you want me to do? I can either stand up.
You just sit right in front of here. That way, if somebody jumps on them, they can see you.
All right. So I just scroll with this.
Yeah, it would be the Dell. So Dell has it. And
Okay. All right, I'll start right here. All right, so my name is Tyrell Johnson, and I chose to do my experience on being an African American in the military, the Army. So my situation that I chose to experience was being an African American in the military, specifically existing on an Army base. Some of the stereotypes that I was able to find on this topic during my research that really stood out to me were that African Americans are highly visible in the military when it comes to lower rankings, such as like E1 through E4. Once it gets to like sergeants and up, it's more like a white is dominant, white. But almost invisible when it comes to the tops, like the chain of command, the officers, the commanders. Some other stereotypes when it comes to African Americans in the military, and their behaviors will be far worse, and they will make things more difficult when being have to ask for things have to be. For instance, soldiers will be more hesitant to do something when they're told to compared to white soldiers. So here, I want to list some of my experiences being an African American in the military on an outline format. My feelings were towards the military are that I definitely feel like there's a difference with being black and being white in the military. I want to say that I do think that being black, you have to work harder to move up in the rankings and prove yourself within the military. My reactions to these are when it comes to observing the reactions in the military between the races, I feel like white soldiers are more happy for their soldiers of their own race and celebrate and applause is like fake love when it comes to African American soldiers. So with that being said, like they cheer more when someone of their own color, I feel like, gets a recognition, more recognition. My experiences, in my experiences, I would say that I have personally experienced some racism, mainly with actions, but it's not from my sergeants or the higher chain of command, but mainly like I said, those lower enlisted soldiers from E1 through 5, that's where they come from, and privates and overall lower enlisted. Going on to the stereotypes, someone who has been able to witness things firsthand, I would say the stereotypes that was among the African American community as far as the military aspect. African American soldiers are subject to be known for being lazy, not producing the quality of work as white soldiers. Black soldiers are not as reliable, but they have been stereotyped to be better soldiers physically than white soldiers. When it comes to communication styles, that I have noticed within the military. Some communication styles that I have experienced that some African Americans have communication skills such as talking in code and often being labeled as clip and standoffish compared to white soldiers. But speaking as someone who has been labeled as these titles as standoffish or speaking in code or clicked up, it is really just the comfortability, I'll say, like just the comfortability of African Americans that we have with each other. And I think the fact that we are outnumbered compared to other races is just a natural feeling that we gravitate toward each other, that we talk to each other more comfortably. And that is the end of my presentation.
What's the highest ranking you can get, like E1, E5, or is
It goes all the way up to like colonel.
so is that like an E10 or
That's
12
like that's
for
so the E's are for
entry level?
yeah
Okay.
not entry level but like commissioned.
Okay.
Commissioned is for officers, and enlisted soldiers are for E's. Once you commission and go to officer route, you're no longer an E. You'll be O. So like ROTC members and stuff,
I was going to ask about that.
they're
So
all
did you do it
commissioned.
here?
No, I didn't commission.
Okay.
I'm a enlisted soldier. I didn't
Okay.
commission. I didn't go that way.
Can you do it as a?
I can if I want to.
But you graduate already, so
Yeah.
it's almost. I guess you do it in graduate school too.
Yeah, you
I guess
can.
they would pay for. Okay. Are you going anywhere for grad school?
Yeah, I don't know where yet, but yeah, I am going somewhere for grad school.
I just saw UCMSW application. If you want to be considered for money, is due November 30th. So we have a connection there. Dr. Ebony Speaks. If you had an interest there, they're a good school.
Okay.
Do you graduate right on?
In the spring?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I can send an email to you and her if you wanted me to.
I would love that.
Is it TM?
Yeah, T
Okay.
Miller Johnson CSU at
Okay.
centerstate.edu.
Cool. I will put that in. What do officers have to do different?
Honestly, the officer route, it requires you to be in the office more, doing paperwork and
Right. I always say, though-
they're the ones that are out in the field doing the work, the trucks and all that stuff. Actually, on the base, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to push a shovel or push a paper? That's what I always say. Push some paper or push a firearm, maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Okay, so Ebony is the Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at University of Cincinnati. She taught here until 2021. She taught social work, and she had us all visit this weekend at the University of Cincinnati. So TM, and then what's the rest of your Johnson?
Yeah, it's T Miller Johnson.
Okay, and then Ebony. Ebony Speaks Hall. Okay. Are you psych or something else? Psychology. Okay. Okay, they have a lot of funding and money for. That's why I'm sending students their way for like scholarships. Is your GPA as a 3 something is what they like to see?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they'll probably throw some cash then. Let's see here. I have one other about military again, another one, but I'm not recalling what it is. Oh yeah, which city are you from in Chicago?
I'm from Columbus.
Oh, okay. I'm like trying to remember. I'm sure Ohio State has some similar, but UC right now has a lot of money for specifically social work majors and let's see here, Dallas Buyers Club. That was another movie I was going to show for diversity that we were talking about.
I just seen that assignment. That was our next assignment that we had.
Yes, correct. So I'll actually put those 2 up. I went ahead and gave you guys both your November assignment and then the final. So I was like, I might as well get them both up because if you want to get them knocked out now, you can. And the final is just a self-assessment questionnaire. Like, oh, I guess I should title it.
Yeah, I see it said on timer.
That's the final.
So
That's
if
pretty funny.
we go ahead and submit these.
You're done.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to do it that way for you guys. Edit assignment, final. So the final here, and I'll write final. It is, as you can see, the final self-assessment. And here is the description, basically beginnings of self-examination, which we all should do. How do we make ourselves better? Our purpose is to suggest areas of personal reflection and inner dialogue. Certainly, we are as people, I should say, who we are as people influences our choice of profession and how we conduct ourselves as professionals. Thus, we first ask social workers in training to examine themselves and from a personal vantage point, examining your values, beliefs, needs, priorities, characteristics. A lot of stuff we've already done. And you can download it and just answer the question. So it's like, who am I as a person? There's like 10 or 12 questions. And you can go just answer every single one, even if it's simple, and you can go as long as you want. And then who am I as a professional? Like, what are my reasons for, and if you're not a social work major, it's okay to say, like, as a psychology major, I want to do this. And as a, what do I expect from clients? How do I expect my profession? What do I anticipate getting from my colleagues? So it's just a list of questions, like 10 or 12 on each, and that is the final. So could still be a few pages, but speaks for itself, and it's simple enough. Like, if you guys do that, and then the diversity presentation, that's what I was going to do it on. Here's a good example of your presentation was a good example of some of those things that could occur. And then this is another way that we still see challenges in America about, have you ever heard of redlining?
No.
I'm picking this because it's only a few minutes, but I'm hoping this explains it as well as the 6-minute video. So they had something historically basing a loan off of the areas you were buying a house in.
Say the word redline in Boston, most people think of a T, but for decades, redlining was a practice that actively created racially segregated neighborhoods in cities across the country, including Boston. Stephanie Leiden tells us about an exhibit that explores how it created boundaries and disparities that carry on into today.
Like giving a loan
At
based
age 68, Paula Corgay
diversity.
contemplates retirement but works a lot. As a teacher's aide, and from her Roxbury home, crafting clothes from African cloth. Every bit helps to pay the rent.
And these are my parents.
Owning a home has long been an elusive goal for her family.
My mother always wanted to buy a house. When we were in the projects, my father had a really good, stable job. He made decent money.
But like most people of color in that era, he could not get a home loan.
So this is the 1960s.
Yes.
Growing up in the 1950s and 60s, she watched as white neighbors left and Roxbury struggled. What she didn't know then was how explicitly race informed federal policy that shaped neighborhoods for haves.
Blue and green are the most desirable areas.
And have-nots.
Red is considered hazardous and undesirable.
April DeSimone is part of a team that produced this exhibit on the history of how neighborhoods like Roxbury were redlined. In the 1930s, the federal government created color-coded maps. They were a guideline for banks. Blue and green meant a neighborhood was a safe place for banks to back loans. Red was high risk, something determined largely by who lived there.
In the survey, you have the word Negro asking what is the percentage of Negroes that live in this area.
Foreign-born residents, Irish, Italians, Jews, also reduced a neighborhood's value. But after World War II, their status changed and they joined an exodus from the city to the suburbs, where home ownership helped create the country's middle class. Meanwhile, federal guidelines continued to promote racial segregation.
If a neighborhood is to retain stability, it is necessary that property shall continue to be occupied by the same social and racial classes,
These policies, she says, not just in Boston, but urban centers nationwide,
not of the white or Caucasian race.
answer a question that resonates today.
Why are we in a hyper-segregated America?
Redlining, she says, not only excluded people from owning and potentially profiting from a home, but confined them to areas of concentrated poverty and little investment. Until recently.
As you see, there's tons of development happening all around here.
Alex Ponte Cavayan is a housing rights organizer. He grew up here in Jamaica Plains, Eggleston Square, a once redline neighborhood where more than a third of the residents make less than $25,000 a year.
This building here, rents are gonna look like $4,000 to $5,000 even for a 3-bedroom.
And so for the people who've lived here for generations, by and large,
It's not housing for them.
Rising rents, he says, are forcing many longtime residents out. As for the people with the means to move in, he says they're likely from communities where the color on a long ago map was something other than red. Stephanie Leyden, WGBH News.
The Undesigned the Red Line exhibit is on display at the Jamaica Plain Brewery through the end of December.
I don't know why that email I sent to you and Ebony was so weird. It has like text stuff at the beginning and the end, but I guess shit happens. Usually it just has you like give them a resume and things of that nature, which a lot of you guys already have too. So here is one other redlining. Did some of that make sense? I know it's hard to understand, but a lot of it.
To hear more about how race shapes American life, visit npr.org/codeswitch. I'm Gene Demby. Be easy.
So these are some of, this is the last one I'll show, but like some ways we can still see this today in loans. And this year, the Fed has raised interest rates on loans. They raised it another 0.25% yesterday, or 0.75%. So an interest rate on a house last year was 3, maybe even 2.5%. Now it's like 7 or 8% to buy a loan on a house. And oh shit, I clicked on the commercial. So it's weird. How do I get it to? Probably because it's CBS. So hopefully some of this is making sense, but it's just like the ideas where how can we help as professional helpers? Oh, it's paused. Okay. With some of the loan stuff. God, they have so many advertisements nowadays. It's insanity. Do they actually work? Am I going to buy that stuff? Have you ever heard of redlining before? It is weird how it's not out as much as it used to be.
For white households, that figure was 171,000, about 10 times as much. One of the drivers of that wealth gap is redlining, the practice of mortgage lenders denying loans to people based on their race or where they live, with those areas marked with red lines on maps. Although the practice was outlawed in 1968, its effects are still being felt today, something entrepreneurs and activists are trying to reverse. What was Auburn Avenue?
well, it was everything. It was Black excellence, it was Black commerce.
In its heyday a century ago, Kimberly Alexander's family business was a fixture here.
There was a period of time after desegregation where businesses shuttered and left because they had opportunity elsewhere. And some people thought the grass was greener on the other side. And so, unfortunately, that left a lot of buildings blighted and the area blighted
And redline.
and redlined.
The federal government began the practice of redlining in the 1930s, outlining in red ink on maps Areas deemed hazardous, often home to sizable Black, minority, and immigrant populations. Based on that, mortgage lenders would deny loans to low-income minorities in those neighborhoods, causing disinvestment and placing home ownership out of reach for people of color.
I think you see it in every city in America. I mean, this is where the basis of segregated neighborhoods remains to this day.
Councilman Amir Faroqi represents this district, half of which is enjoying the bloom of reinvestment, the other still blighted.
I mean, you can draw a line kind of the northwest to southeast, and most of the neighborhoods above that line are predominantly white, and those beneath it are predominantly Black. And so you still are living with the generational divide and the wealth gap that happens because of that.
The 1968 Fair Housing Act outlawed redlining nationwide, and city leaders here pushed projects like Invest Atlanta to revitalize distressed areas. But many neighborhoods once deemed hazardous are still more than likely than others to consist of lower income minority residents.
We've had my childhood home for probably over 7 decades. And I simply said, I'm going to try to make a difference here.
Chicago native and real estate developer LaMelvin Morris is trying to revitalize neighborhoods without completely gentrifying them or pricing out longtime residents. He calls that balance greenlining.
I want to make greenlining about neighborhood reinvestment and neighborhood redevelopment.
In June, his firm, Greenlining Realty USA, partnered with a DC-based nonprofit to both build and rehab residential properties in Woodlawn, an area rich in culture. It's a setting for Lorraine Hansberry's play shaped by housing discrimination, A Raisin in the Sun, and the future home of the Obama Presidential Center.
My goal is to be a resource and to be a catalyst and to spur investment. It's almost like dropping a pebble and watching a ripple effect.
He's acquired vacant, abandoned, and tax-delinquent properties and sells them at below market rates. Buyers must be community-based developers who then rehab the properties and sell them to prospective homeowners.
If you're really serious about neighborhood transformation, it's not going to get done by simply building new homes on vacant lots and rehabbing blighted properties, right? I've also had to make an investment in my grammar school across the street. I've also had to partner with the YWCA of Chicago. I've had to work with various community groups that are working with gangbangers and trying to get kids off the street. So it's a 360-degree transformation. And so it's one thing to be interested in the financial gains, but we also have to be involved and engaged and just as concerned around the social gains.
So the Development Corporation owns this whole block?
Just about, minus one property on the corner.
Back in Atlanta, Shanae Joseph runs the Historic District Development Corporation, a grassroots organization founded by Coretta Scott King to preserve the Martin Luther King Jr. historical corridor nearby.
The houses that you see in this neighborhood were either vacant lots or just dilapidated. And so within 40 years, HDC alone has built or rehabbed about 121 single-family homes. We've built about 500 units and 40,000 square feet of commercial space.
But that hasn't been without challenges. A majority of affordable housing here is owned by nonprofits and churches, much of it unsubsidized. So HDDC can't easily profit off of its investments.
What you've done in 40 years, bigger development operations have been able to do in 2 to 5.
They've been able to do that with quite a bit of resources. It's the resources that aren't exactly afforded to us. We've basically had to create something out of nothing. And to be able to do that almost single-handedly is an accomplishment that we don't take lightly.
Despite the practice being illegal, Black loan applicants are still turned away by banks at a higher rate than white applicants. Of white Americans to build wealth through equity in homes and businesses, further widening a wealth gap African Americans have yet to rebound from.
We have a cat cafe on Erwin Street. It is a cafe in which you pay money to pet cats.
And so you're saying you can give money to
Pet cats,
yeah, but you can't give money to.
but I can't seem to get money to revitalize one of the oldest African American streets in America.
Showing that on paper in black and white, Joseph says, is key.
This is a sketch of all of the projects that are planned and in process on Auburn Avenue. You're looking at about $500 million of redevelopment.
So this is a good investment, you're
This
saying?
is absolutely a good investment.
Why?
Well, this is good because you're working with stakeholders that already own their properties, right? So you're not having to deal with acquisition, but more importantly, what you're doing is you're reinvesting back into your community that's going to continue to prosper time and time again.
It's what Kimberly Alexander's family did, buying the property across the street, which before the pandemic was home to several businesses.
Invest Atlanta has been an integral part of providing capital for businesses. But I still say there needs to be the private sector that gets involved and developers that want to make this city live up to its, creed.
And, we mentioned the pandemic, wreaking havoc on businesses. It also has a health impact, and there's a connection with redlining in that, folks who suffer from asthma and COPD and diabetes and obesity in larger numbers, African Americans, that's because the desperate effects are due to that they don't have access to health and hospitals. They're just not in those neighborhoods. So it's still impacting.
It's like dropping a pebble and
Right,
seeing.
yeah.
seeing
Great report, Michelle.
So that's some of the stuff on redlining.
So that whole thing with diversity, the papers has to be about.
It used to be a very specific assignment when we had like a digital book. So I kind of edited just a 2-page essay explaining how prejudice of anyone has an impact on client. It could be you're working as a psychologist or social worker at an agency, and somehow you find out the hard way one of your coworkers is racist or like mean to a person coming in maybe to get an assessment, and they're like, hey, I wanted to be assessed for this, and they're just short with them. And so I did change the words a little bit. I hope it makes sense. Impact on a client and generally extent on which cultures, structures, and values may oppress, marginalize, alienate, or enhance privilege or power. And that's why I chose redlining. You could use that as the example. And
What are some other examples out there for like diversity? I might.
yeah, if there's other stuff you're aware of, like the way you explained in the military, that's a good one. There's even some new research being done on racial disparities in mental health. So there's a lot.
So what should I look up to get some more options out there for prejudice?
A hot button word lately is called like racial disparities. If you just search racial disparities in blank, and you'll find a lot of stuff, I'm sure. And hopefully that email got through to you. And if Ebony doesn't reply, like send her your resume, tell her you've got the GPA you had. She'll be like, you want $10,555. So, because it is due in 28 days. So I know it's another assignment